I assure you I'm not the saddest right now. I'm the happiest I could possibly be to be with you this morning. So this is a little bit of a mulligan because we're good at the moment, don't worry. Being a conscious entrepreneur has been a journey for me, and I like to think it's actually been a journey since I was 9 years old. I grew up in northern Minnesota in a place called the Iron Range, exact town, Mountain Iron, Minnesota, population 2,200 people. And at the ripe age of 9, I was a shop kid. So for those that grew up in family businesses, this might be a familiar trope, but a shop kid is a kid who grows up in a family business that has some kind of retail environment. And my family had a canoe outfitting business. We took people on canoe expeditions to the Boundary Waters canoe area on the Minnesota and Canadian border and gave guided tours of the Boundary Waters canoe area because it turns out, despite how fit Americans are, that's with jest, there's a lot of people who think they can do nature and really can't do nature. We take that for granted in Colorado, but in northern Minnesota, lots of people show up from Chicago thinking they can do nature, and then problems ensue. And as a shop kid, I had a front row seat to what it was like to be in a family business. My grandfather and my grandmother started the company. My mother packed the lunches and prepared the camp kits. My father did all the marketing and the signs and the business cards, and I was just cute. But I felt really, really called to do something to make the business better, because those who haven't been to the coldest place in America, and yes, Mountain Iron, Minnesota is right up there next to International Falls, so it is the coldest place in America. There was a solid 6 months of the year where we had no business. We made no money. And let's not even get into why that was such a bad business plan on my grandfather's part. But I really wanted to contribute. I felt the stress of my family. I felt the struggle of my family to make this business work over the years. And so when I was 9, I got the bright idea that I was going to pick blueberries, fresh blueberries, from the bushes around our shop, and I'd put them into containers, and I would sell them in front of the shop. So when people were going on their expeditions or coming back from their expeditions, I would sell them some freshly picked blueberries. And I hauled it in, y'all. Like, lemonade stands can go straight to hell. I would make 140, 150, 160 bucks in a single weekend picking blueberries as a 9-year-old. And it was rooted in me. It was just like, if it wasn't born into me with this family business, it was rooted in me that you can see something, take advantage of it, and creatively make something happen for yourself. And so naturally, why would it not be logical then that I didn't study business at all in college? In fact, I decided, you know what, I'm going to be Barbara Walters. And I went to journalism school. I studied broadcast television. Now, let me be really clear on the intent here, because that inner story of, oh, wow, I can make something happen. I can take my own power. I can be empowered. I saw that in Barbara Walters, rest her soul. As a little girl, growing up in, frankly, the middle of nowhere, the only woman I knew who had the power to ask tough questions of presidents, who was welcomed to the table with the CEOs, who was sent out in the field in the war zones, was Barbara Walters. She had power, and boy, did power look good. And so I thought, well, geez, I talk pretty good. Maybe I can be the next Barbara Walters. So I went to school to study broadcast television, and I graduated in 2007, and I got my first assignment in San Antonio, Texas. And I get down to San Antonio, Texas, and boy, let me tell you, I had a rude awakening. I go on my first field assignment, and the tape comes back. And for those that don't know how television is made, especially the nightly news, you go out into the world, you film a segment that somebody told you should film. Usually it's a fire, a murder, a lost dog, a lost kid, a lost anything. There's a terrible colloquialism, if it bleeds, it leads. No wonder that didn't last for me very long. I hate blood. But I was sent out on an assignment by an executive producer to go film the story. And it was not a good news story. It was about a local grocery store shutting down and a giant conglomerate coming into that real estate space. And my executive producer looked at me and the tape and said, we won't be airing this, Liz, and unfortunately, I don't think you'll be on television as an anchor or as a broadcaster. I have some bad news. You're not particularly likable. And you know, down here in Texas, you're also not particularly wifeable. And that's what we look for when we put talent on camera. I know, I've never, and hey, great news, I got married, so I am wifeable. And I think I'm relatively likable, but that's a whole other head game. But you know, this incredibly transformative moment that happened to me at the age of 22, I gave up. I thought, my God, well, this man has all the power. He decides who's on television. He doesn't think I'm likable on camera. He doesn't think I'm wifeable, whatever the hell that means. And I suppose I should learn how to do something else. And that's what turned me to becoming a television editor. I became a behind-the-scenes television editor. And the great news is that I was actually really good at it. I had a natural talent for cutting out the crap. I was really, really skilled at figuring out how to do things quickly. I could make a story that was a turd and polish it really quickly. And in fact, I was so good at it, but by the time I was 26, I had won not only my first Emmy, but my second Emmy. And thank you. And it's a profound thing when you find something that you're good at by accident, because it could have been a sad story. In fact, for many people, I think it would have been a sad story. Maybe they would have given up on television altogether. But instead, it really, really hardened me. And we talked this morning, Alex talked about the inner game. This story is about the outer game. Because what I learned from that experience was that there were so many stories that people were telling themselves about me, like this guy deciding somewhat arbitrarily after one 2-minute segment that I wasn't likable and I wasn't wifeable, that was going to impact how my life was shaped, how my career would unfold. And I never wanted to be that disempowered again. And so I embarked on a career, and we'll sort of fast forward a bunch of years. Suffice it to say, 12 years ago, I decided to become a founder. I started my first production company. And I really wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best in the world at one thing. And at the time, I thought I want to be the best entrepreneur I can possibly be. And that meant things like being extremely extroverted, showing up for every single event, pitching everywhere that they would take me, and working really hard to being likable. I remember thinking, well, you know what? I see these other founders out in the world who get famous, who get attention, who get a lot of accolades, and they're everywhere. They're networking all the time. They know everyone. They tweet funny quips. They are everywhere. And not only that, they start tech companies. Tech companies are the thing. Tech companies are the thing that get people rich and famous and excited, and that's what people value in this world now. And so I started building a company around that vision, and I started referring to myself as a general badass. And in fact, if you would have gone onto my LinkedIn page at any point between the year 2015 and literally 2023, if you were to go look at my title, it said founder, CEO, and general badass. And at the time, I didn't understand why this felt so natural to me, but it felt important to me. First of all, I wanted people to know they couldn't fuck with me. And I didn't want to hear their feedback about being unwifeable or unlikable or any of the other things they had to say to me. And it turns out when you call yourself a general badass, people generally avoid giving you feedback at all. Like, literally, they will just be like, oh God, she must really think highly of herself, so we're just gonna go ahead and avoid all conversation around the topic. And the truth of the matter is it worked kind of brilliantly. I was able to negotiate the sale of my first company. I got it in my head, I'm gonna get into Techstars Boulder. I'm gonna start my second tech company. It's gonna be a tech-first company. I'm gonna prove to people that artists, and that was the other crazy-ass outer game, because I had these gold statues and because I was known as being a creative person and because I had a creative career professionally, I really had this I used to say to people, I don't just have a chip on my shoulder, I have a whole goddamn potato on my shoulder of things I have to prove about artists can start technology companies. Who gives a shit? But I really cared about it. And it was this incredibly important outer game. And branding myself a general badass did a lot of things. I remember distinctly sitting down for my first conversation with the folks at Techstars and several of them saying to me like, oh, general badass, that's really bold. Like you really do have the confidence to go after this. And I thought, well, maybe, I don't know. It really worked for you though. And wouldn't you know it, I got into Techstars. And my company, Suna, I literally could get any press I wanted. I could write any journalist and be like, yeah, I'm starting this company. I wanted to talk about XYZ thing. You know, would you be interested in talking to me? And people would see that I would call myself a general badass, and they would think like, oh, she's going to say something outlandish. She's going to be brave. She's going to be effervescent. She's going to call the shots, and she's not going to be afraid to call people out. And that's true. I wasn't. I wasn't afraid to call people. I wasn't afraid to do anything. I literally just thought to myself, seize the day. Seize the day. This general badass persona got so bad that at one point, after I raised my Series A, and we had raised from a very, I don't know, this is all like silly talk to me now, but a very blue chip investor, whatever the hell that means. Somebody who I respected a lot said to me, you know, it must be nice to be a little bit feared by men in this startup game. I thought, oh shit, are men afraid of me? Like, I missed that. Like, when did that happen? When did changing my title to General Badass on LinkedIn turn into be afraid of me? I had built this entire outer game, this entire persona around don't fuck with me, and I really think a lot of myself. Now, I want to be really clear. I actually do think a lot of myself. I have achieved a lot. I have put my own talents to the best use I possibly could. And one of the complexities of being a female founder, I often find, is that a lot of people have a great deal of discomfort with women liking themselves in general and women wanting things in general. It turns out that we as a society haven't quite figured out that women wanting things is okay, it's normal. And women liking themselves is actually really healthy for all of us because we treat each other better, we raise better children, we're better bosses, we're better colleagues, we're better friends, we're better partners. And all of those things that I started to reflect on about this title, this persona, I realized they were a really inadequate, it was a really inadequate description for, oh, you know what, I do want things and I do like myself and I'm willing to fight for them. But this shorthand, it means a lot of other things to other people that doesn't let them be curious about me, that doesn't invite conversation, that doesn't give me room to change and evolve, and probably, as what I'm about to tell you next, most devastatingly, created no room for me to ever have doubts, have fears, or be sad about stuff. 2021 was possibly the most hype I've ever had around myself as a person, ever. My business was growing 500% year over year. We had raised a large Series A in April of 2021, and I was about to close an even larger Series B in November of 2021 from Bain Capital Ventures. There was a bidding war for my Series B. I felt like hot shit. And this general badass thing, let me tell you, when you're talking to investors, there is nothing investors love more than the persona of a person who is not going to do anything but fight to the death for their business. And this really, really worked in that process. November 18th, I was in my kitchen looking at, November 18th, 2021, I was in my kitchen looking at 3 different term sheets for my Series B from 3 different investors. I had called my dad, and I said, Dad, look, Look what I did. Look what I accomplished. I can't. And my dad was a public school teacher, had no money. But he gave me $25,000 from his retirement for my business. I said, Dad, your $25,000 stake is now worth more than your entire retirement. I think we should take a secondary. I think we should help you get security to retire. November 21st, I got a call from my brother while I was walking in Whole Foods. My dad had died of a coronary aneurysm. When I tell you that there is no amount of money in the world that changes how that flattened me, believe me. I got on a plane, went home, met my brother, landed in northern Minnesota after a 4-hour-long drive, sat in my childhood home. And I received one text message from those investors who had given me term sheets, just one. There's a guy named Scott Friend who, I don't know where his ancestors came from, but he has earned that moniker of Scott Friend. He's earned that last name, let me tell you. He said, I want you to know I don't care how long it takes, whatever you got to do, whatever you got to solve with your family. The term sheet stands, the deal stands, the valuation stands. And if you choose me or you don't choose me, no rush. Scott did not give me the best offer, but Scott got the deal because it turns out Scott was a decent human being. But the reckoning of losing my father in the midst of closing this massive transaction, growing my business, seeing a lot of external success, was then followed up by possibly one of the craziest ass events of my life. When I tell you this story, you're literally gonna go, I'm sorry, what the fuck? But my dad loved the movie The Lion King. And so after my dad passed away, I didn't have it in me to clean out my childhood home, so I decided my husband and I were going to board a plane and go to Africa and go see on a safari. And look, for future advice, if you're going through grief, don't do weird shit like this. Don't go 2 weeks from your parents' funeral to Africa because turns out your grief goes with you and you're real confused. So I'm in Africa. I'm literally landing in Nairobi and I get a text message that my dog sitter had lost my dog. And I can't figure out how the hell to get home from Nairobi to Denver quickly enough. And in fact, there's only 2 flights a week that go from this particular place to Denver. And so I was going to have to wait 4 days. By the time I had gotten sorted out my flight on the way home, I learned that my beloved dog, Fran, had been hit by a car. To the world, to my company even, my life was on the up. I was the baddest. In my personal life, I was a mess. I was a wreck. I don't know that I had ever been lower, and I frankly don't think I've ever been lower since. But I flew home, I closed the Series B transaction, I started delivering on the promises I had made to our Series B investors about my company. And I kept moving along, trying to be a badass, trying to be this person that I had branded myself as in the world. And it all came crumbling down like a house of cards. I would be in KPI, monthly business review meetings, and somebody would say something and I would just start tearing up and I couldn't explain it. I was so perplexed. I would show up to a networking event and somebody would ask me about my, whatever, some random thing going on in my business. And I would say, I'm really sorry, I can't talk to you right now. And I would have to leave. I literally couldn't handle human interaction. I couldn't handle being confronted with the fact that people were expecting something from me. And I couldn't be that person anymore because I wasn't that person. And so to my point, I had to think about what this persona was that I had built and how it had created impossible standards, impossible expectations, But most importantly, forget everybody else, it robbed me of truth. It robbed me of myself. It robbed me of complexity. And it robbed me of, frankly, being able to be a full person. I wanted to be a full person. So I embarked on a really interesting process with my husband. God bless my husband, who tolerates the madness that is my personality. I started a process with my husband where we decided we were going to reimagine ourselves and reimagine our marriage. There was a lot of toll that this business experience took on our marriage, took on our life. And part of that reimagining was my husband saying, I think we should have a child. My husband had just turned 40. His exact words were, my preference is not to be grandpa at high school graduation, so could we hurry this up a little bit and have a baby? And so we had a baby. We had a baby girl. And in possibly what is the most kismet thing on planet Earth, my daughter Eden was born 1 year to the exact day that my dad died. And look, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that motherhood is healing. It's fucking not. The TLDR on this talk isn't get pregnant, have a baby, discover you're a mother, and be healed. That is not the gist, okay? The point is transformation, and the point is for allowing complication to exist in who you are. This is not actually what it says on my LinkedIn now. I think it says something like, our struggling artist loudmouth with 2 gold statues and, a proclivity for too much cinema. Like, I think it probably says something ridiculous like that right now. But it's because life is complex. Being conscious, not just a conscious entrepreneur, being conscious is complex. Being a person in the world who is trying to figure out not just your inner game, but your outer game is complex. Living in curiosity, as much as we say it's above the line, being curious is fucking complex. Trying to understand who you are and who you want to associate with is complex. And it is a lifelong journey. It cannot be summed up as I am an entrepreneur, or I am a founder, or I am a CEO or CMO, or I am even a mother. It is more complex than that. And I have found that as I have allowed for more complexity to exist in my life, it has broadened in my relationships. It has deepened my appreciation of myself. It has deepened my enjoyment of the moments that are actual garbage, because I can laugh at it and not feel that everything is a blocker to my identity or preventing me from being who I want to be. And it allows me to experience the pure joy of being a silly motherfucker who's just trying to figure it out like everybody else, no matter what everything else from the outside looking in might be. So, from one silly motherfucker to another, sorry, I've decided. I encourage you to think about what story you're telling the world, about how you see other people, how you maybe put a word over their head accidentally when you see them or incidentally, and how that robs you of the curiosity that might exist in deepening that relationship. And most importantly, the fun that can happen when you allow life to be a hell of a lot more messy. Thank you.